Welcome to another episode of Awakening Dialogues. I'm really thrilled to be joined by a friend and teacher and beautiful soul, Brian Piergrossi. He's over in Nashville today. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you, Will. Great to be with you.
It's quite something, isn't it? You're over there in North Carolina, Asheville. I'm here in Stephen Morden, Hertfordshire, UK, and we're with each other.
We are, and you were in Asheville recently, and we didn't get a chance to see you. And then I was in England, not recently, but in the past year, didn't get a chance to see you. And then we spent time in Italy together for like a week.
The life of the jet-setting teacher and facilitator.
Yeah, it's fun.
It is. What a blessing. We were just chatting about the role of the teacher, and I loved what you said that's been interesting for you at the moment around, I think there were three words that really caught my attention: that raw, naked, and authentic, and how technology is supporting that. And
yeah,
it's something I'm really excited about as well, both the technological support and offering as much rawness and nakedness and authenticity as is possible.
Yeah, there's more and more transparency. And just a sense of like, you know, a normal discussion before dialogues or interviews is what's the topic, what's the theme, and just this sense of like, if we have a raw, naked, authentic conversation, and what comes forward from that, I mean, that's more beautiful than whatever the theme is. I was corresponding with a young lady who's not a teacher, but just getting started as far as getting her voice out there, as someone who's like blogging about her life on the path of the spiritual path. And what I was telling her that I was really found beautiful is that she's sharing so authentically, you know, and so in such a raw way, her journey, that itself is healing for people, you know, more so than whatever the topic is. The fact that she's just so real, you know, and vulnerable in her writing is healing people, because then of course it invites and inspires other people to open up as well.
Yeah, there's something I like the way you phrase it as actually healing, the offering of vulnerability. I think it does something very powerful. It communicates, or it offers a template for safety. You know, it says this is here, this is being experienced or being felt or whatever, and it's okay, you know, and it can be shared in public view, and there's no shame. It's an exquisite offering in and of itself.
Yeah, there's this call some of us get to be a public figure, and it's a very weird phenomenon, as you're familiar with. And it's like spirit taps you on the shoulder, you know, and just there's this call to express what you feel will be beneficial to the world. And there can be that tendency in that space to create an image, you know, to create this image of yourself, the image you want to project, and have people try to support it. And that whole game can play itself out. But if there can be that sense of, if there's a call to put yourself out as a public figure and have that sense of authenticity and just be in that authenticity moment by moment, I think that is something that's really beautiful and powerful and healing for people, and really somewhat new. You know, it's somewhat hasn't really been the case so much traditionally in the past.
I agree, and it's interesting. I've encountered both in some marketing training and with an editor I was working with, a desire to, or an encouragement to sort of mold something to, I remember I wrote in a text that, you know, the pinnacle of what I've really discovered on the path is the vastness of my ignorance and how little I know. And this editor was like, no, you can't, I hear you. You can't say that. You've got to position yourself as an expert. And I was like, oh, really? I'm not sure how comfortable I am with positioning myself as an expert. And an expert in what? I feel fairly expert in my own unfolding and my own insight and observations and experiences. And after a few years, there's some proficiency, I hope, with working with groups and so on. But it feels far more natural for me, certainly, just to show up. And if I look like an expert, that's a nice bit of luck.
Yeah. That reminds me, I had a call with like a marketing type person from Los Angeles, from Hollywood, some years ago, and I was excited about, I was still fairly new and excited about getting myself out there to people. So I was excited to have this chance to talk with her. So I looked at your videos. First off, you talk too slow. and you have to have a consistent look. Like you have different hair, your hair's different times, and your clothes, and we have to work on like the way you like your body movements. And I'm like, oh my God, like, where's the authenticity in this?
Mm-hmm. And there's got to be a middle ground, because, there is a learning around the whole way of communicating in this space. And I think there's an interest for me. It's always a pragmatic approach, and like what makes this work the best, what is what works the best. I know that when I started doing YouTube videos, I just had brain surgery and I had a sort of semi-Mohican, so there was like no hair here. And often my motivation has been an insight has just arisen, or there's a particular depth of joy that wants to be shared, as it were. And the recording is very impromptu, and it just happens. And what I am learning is to keep it short and sweet, to aware of short attention spans, and to try and help the watcher, the listener, by being as concise as I possibly can.
I think you bring up something interesting. Like there's a sense of being authentic, being real, being genuine, and there's a message that's intended to be communicated, right? So there is this other component of like, are people receiving the message? Are they getting it? Are they understanding what I'm saying? Am I communicating in a way that's what I'm intending to communicate is being received as a writer, as a speaker, as a teacher, as an artist? So it's not necessarily, it's this line of like, not compromising who you are or being, creating a false image. But if I talk a little bit faster, or if I talk a little bit slower, if I slow down, if I speed up, if I use this word instead of that word, is it helpful for you to understand what I'm saying? So that's another interesting layer of it as well.
Yeah, there's a balance between showing up as we are and doing so in a way that's got some thought behind it. And I'm certainly, I'm very impressed by the Buddha as an obvious example in terms of someone who's created such a completeness of a teaching and a model. Still, it gets debated and interpreted and so on. But there is a lot to be said for having a clarity. It's what is the essence of what I'm offering? And for me, that essence is radical gratitude, and that's multidimensional and expands for me each year, each 6 months. So I'm a student of my teaching as well as being articulating it and pointing people to it. I think that helps. In my observation, it helps me work with people, because it's not that the challenges they might be experiencing are so far away or so distant in memory that I can't recall what it's like to be there. So it seems to support that empathy and compassion to really sit with someone else's suffering or sit with someone else's confusion.
Yeah, and really feel where someone is and feel what's the avenue that that's the art of the teacher, right? So I think what's interesting is that it feels like there's a spiritual awakening, and we can get into what exactly that is and what that isn't, but there's a spiritual awakening that one can have, awakening to the essence of themselves. And that is what it is. And it's kind of this thing that's beyond space and time, and be open to it, and there's a certain quality of grace to it. And then there's an integration process, but also there's the quality of being skillful as a teacher, right? So what's really interesting is someone can have a really profound spiritual awakening and not really know how to teach other people necessarily about it.
Sure.
Or someone can have a really strong intellectual understanding of spiritual awakening, but not really necessarily have that realization themselves. So I find that kind of fascinating how, like, both for myself, speaking for myself, for example, I find as a teacher, the more experience I have, I get better and better. And I've realized that there is a more of a value to that than I realized. So as the spiritual awakening doesn't necessarily take time. It's a timeless, you pop open, but the teaching aspect there is time and experience and learning about human beings. That's really rich.
Do you find it supports your own unfolding as well? Because my experience is certainly that the teaching is one of the reasons I love it and it feels right is not just that it benefits others in their expansion and well-being and awakening, but it causes me to get greater clarity to in the languaging and in the articulating, in the pointing at the moon, as it were, to really gain a greater subtlety of understanding and at least a capacity to share it and articulate it.
Yeah, I feel like, we both do coaching sessions, and I feel like, I learned so much.
Yeah.
Right, from those sessions. And you and I, we both interact with people from around the world too. So all these different cultures and ways of looking at things and ways of seeing things. And I think you learn so much about, and that's what I'm trying to articulate is there's the spiritual awakening, which transcends the mind and transcends content. And then there's the human condition, and learning about that and all the different ways that we can resist or distort or run from or hide from or attach ourselves to this or that, and all these different ways this stuff plays out. I mean, it's really amazing the deeper and deeper you go into it. And we're all moving through the human experience. So what we're noticing in other people, what their reflection is also the opportunity definitely for self-discovery as well. Yeah.
And I hear that, the number of occasions I've completed a coaching session and there's been something, the sort of the key insight or the key clarity is something that's reaffirmed for myself. And there's that sort of sense that I was being coached in this dialogue as well. And that really helps sort of dispel or dissolve any notions of one who knows or indeed that sort of the absurdity of the idea of teacher and student. I personally, I don't feel comfortable talking about having students. This seems to me to be not representative of the attitude and the vibe that I enjoy co-creating with people, which is, in mutuality. And sure, there's a sort of leading and a facilitating, and yet there's a very real and essential equality and meeting as friends rather than that I have something to tell people. We're inquiring and exploring together is how it feels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like the real role of a teacher is to be a mirror to reflect you back to yourself more clearly. That to me has always been like my sense of like what the actual function is. So it's really, you're just bringing someone back to themselves, and the more present someone can be, the more clear they can be inside, then the more they can reflect you back to yourself more clearly.
And that's quite, often there'll be an observation or a pointing to something, and yet so much of that is entirely beyond language and beyond words.
Yeah.
And when you were speaking earlier about the awakening experience or the awakening timeless moment, it ultimately can't be spoken of. It's translingual. It's just paradox after paradox after paradox, and so there's this wonderful humor to the very idea of teaching what we are. You know,
right.
it's like it's an evidence of how we're in a kind of spiritual infancy at this point on planet Earth, and true nature is this everyday, normal, inescapable aspect to, one would assume, every human being's experience. We have this whole wonderful forgetting and remembering and the path. And I love this phrase of Adyashanti. I'm not sure if you've heard it, that he hopes the best he can do is to fail well as a teacher. That's kind of his goal. There's a recognition that ultimately it is going to be failure. Yeah.
There's something valuable about my friend Ash calls it the confirmation. So, you know, this awakening is, you have this awakening in yourself. And what I find, the part that's valuable is just for somebody who's an actual real human being to go, yeah, like, I understand what you experienced, and I've experienced it too. And you're not crazy. You know, here's what's happening. Like, that part seems to be really valuable. I know it's valuable for me. It's been valuable for other people. Because you can get in this space where you pop open to something and you just don't know what's going on. You feel maybe you're crazy. Maybe, you know, somehow someone just going, yeah, like, not even necessarily in words, but you can feel that they get you, and there's that confirmation that that makes you realize almost like on a cognitive level, you know, what's happening inside you. And it really, I guess you could say, it's the integration process, right? That's where the teacher is really valuable, is the integration process. I don't necessarily know how valuable the teacher, to be honest with you, really even is in bringing a spiritual awakening, to be totally honest. I mean, it happens people just walking down the street or looking at a tree, or, you know, it happens when it happens. But that integration process is where it feels like the teacher really becomes a valuable asset.
Yeah, and if someone's ripe and pops, as it were, in a satsang or in a retreat, it's got nothing to do with me. You know, there's a clarity on this, and the I'm actually in full agreement on this. It's quite interesting.
It is really interesting. I think what can happen there is you can kind of create the conditions, right? So you put some in a space. There's this energy of a satsang, and someone feels so relaxed, and they feel like they can really be themselves, and then that space opens up. But it's not the sense of like, I'm going to make you feel this, or I'm going to force this into being. You know, that doesn't work. But if you can create the conditions, you create the opportunity for someone to open themselves. So I think that's possible.
And ask the questions, you know, because when you've experienced confusion or there's little cul-de-sacs of mind and so on, it becomes possible to question a thought or an assumption, and point. There's this wonderful. There's two phrases from Zen that I love, and I feel Zen offers a really solid foundation and framework for the process of teaching, including, you know, after the Satori, to spend another 10 years in the Zendo and then perhaps teach, which I think is sound generally, but my context was I'd recently been diagnosed with brain cancer, so this didn't strike me as prudent. And I also feel that the world is in such a place that we are in need of as many people willing to bare their souls and point, even if half-baked, rather than being in a position where we you know, are all going to wait until a sort of certain perfection has been apparently experienced. The other thing I was going to say about the Zen, just to complete that, was the finger pointing at the moon notion. This wonderful metaphor for teaching and selling water by the river is the other metaphor that I love. This idea that in the pointing people back to what they are, there's a lunacy, there's a humor about it, because they're in the river, they're awake, they're enlightened, and yet there's some absence of clarity around that at this moment, it seems. So there's a sort of lightness and a humor around this that seems appropriate to the context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a tremendous paradox at the root of all of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. You know, even the idea of, you could say it different ways, but moving someone into the now, right? Well, you can't really move someone into the now, because now is now. So like anything we're trying to do, but obviously there is some, on the other level, there is some value that's people receive from that. So I think the more I just wrote a blog about a couple weeks ago that people seem to really appreciate. The more that you get to the root of this, the truth of this, the more the humor is present, you know, and there's a lightness around it. And I find when people are, when people are still in a place where they're really attached and identify with the ego, and they're really looking for answers, it's not so funny to them. But the more you open up, there's kind of a lightness. There's more of a, it's all water, as you said, right? So there's that feeling of equanimity with things, neutrality, and a humor. That's an inherent condition of awakening to this absolute truth.
Yeah, I have to remind myself, perhaps that's more accurate, remind myself or selves to that it is all a play, and
yes,
ultimately nothing is actually really requiring us to take it seriously.
Yeah.
And apart from perhaps that, this is the Oscar Wilde quote, that life is too important to take seriously, right? It's far too important. So there's the paradox of every breath, every step, every interaction, every meal being a heavenly moment, an opportunity for union with the divine, an opportunity to see yourself and the other, and so on and so on and so on. And none of it really matters.
Right. Paradox. And then the other paradox is that, there can be this perception sometimes. This is interesting for us to explore for a few minutes, I think, actually. There's this perception that, well, then you don't care about the world, and there's these horrible things happening. And I know from you and I being friends that you and I both care about the world very much. And I think that's the paradox, is that when you open into this space of this lightness of being, you actually are the greatest benefit to the world. The more you open to it, than if you're in this heavy, reactive, resistant, inner division inside, and that energy, as opposed to this energy of, it's funny because, there's this perception that if you're like angry and you're in this resistant energy, you're making positive change, and it's not necessarily the case. I've discovered for myself, I'm interested in your perspective, that when there's this lightness of being, and there's just an openness, ability to just respond to the moment, that I myself and my perception of others is that there's much more benefit to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. We have these sort of conditioned thoughts and ideas about what represents caring, or
yes, exactly,
being nice or kind, and these sorts of things. And I also observe the same thing, that the paradox is I care very deeply for whatever reason about the state of the world, and I feel that I have a role to play along with the other 7 billion or so of us in our collective evolution, in our shifting into more functional ways of being as humans. And that vision and desire rocks up against the reality of the world, which is chaotic, highly dysfunctional, a huge amount of manipulation and stimulation of fear and shame. The Matrix is the Matrix, right? It's pretty wild out there. And the path that I've been exploring recently is being engaged in that, sharing a petition here or there, or pointing out something about the nature of a government or whatever it might be, and remembering to do so from a place and checking in, because sometimes I notice there's some tension, which might be some conditioning in me from the angry teenager 20 years ago, that can come up if I'm pointing to some of these aspects of the world. And so, yes, for me to be most helpful in the sharing, so the energy behind what's being shared, and certainly in conversation, if I'm speaking about where I'd like to see us going collectively, if I can bring that lightness along with the deep care, this seems to be the most helpful approach. And so again, it's a paradox, is it not? Because there's this deep passion in me, certainly, and pain that's felt and frustration at times when I see what we are doing to each other, and a recognition that to be at peace with that and to see the all is wellness of the drama, to see the perfection of this very imperfect world, it is actually on a more subtle level than the post or the conversation, on a sort of energetic vibrational level, to see the world and forgive it, as it were, to see the truth at the core of all the madness, the love at core of all that separation and absurdity. So I think there's something in this that you are pointing to, that this is when we're most useful to regard the world and through sane eyes.
Yeah, there's this really interesting phenomenon of, there's this increasing level of equanimity and neutrality of, you could say, like, it doesn't matter, in a way you could say, where it doesn't matter what happens, nothing's ever happened, nothing will ever happen, nothing's going to happen, nothing's happening. And in that realization, there's also what I find is there is this, you use the word passion, there is this deepening of passion, actually, deepening of compassion, deepening of creativity. So I really like this phrase that Jesus used, actually, which seems accurate, being in the world but not of it. Yeah. Right? So you're just fully giving yourself to the moment, and yet on some level you're also not of it either.
Yeah, I wrote a really interesting blog. A friend of mine, Michael Richardson Bourne, wrote this piece about questioning whether the level of consciousness of a protest movement will impact its efficacy. So if there's a group of people that are present and awake, might that actually be the most useful protest? And there's the obvious example. You look back to Gandhi, someone that was fairly awake, it would seem. He was in contact with his essence, with presence, and he moved very powerfully in such a way as to create social change. And so for me, certainly, seeing that it's an illusion, or seeing that it's all a play, doesn't mean that I check out, doesn't mean that I just go off, just sort of like, sit in my own bliss. This seems narcissistic and indulgent, and I think it's a mistake to go into a sort of moral relativism where everything's cool, because it is cool on an absolute level.
Yeah.
And at the same time, if there's someone down the street who I can assist in some way, I want to do that. And if I can contribute to a global community that can articulate a new way of being, offer a different way for humans to play and explore, then I feel a very wonderful joy about this possibility to contribute to our evolution, to contribute to a more functional humanity.
Yeah, amen to that. I think there's noticing, like, in oneself in the moment, is there any layer, even if it's very subtle, of resistance, to the moment? So we can get in this ideology of like, nothing matters, and then we see somebody that needs help, and there's this kind of contraction inside, right? So if nothing matters, why are you contracting? Why not just be open to responding to the situation in the moment? So I think there's like this internal, present awareness, like noticing if there's any subtle levels of division or resistance or contraction, or if there's a natural openness to the moment to respond to what's arising, to really notice that. And that, it can be very subtle, right? So,
and it can be subtle in the, I've noticed often, not so much these days, but years back, it would be quite common to see an individual articulating an absolute non-dual point of view around nothing mattering, for example. And the appearance on occasion was that it appeared to matter to them that nothing mattered. So it seemed important that this point of view be heard and agreed with, and that was quite humorous to observe. And so whether it's the articulating of a view or the movement in the world, I think you point to something quite profound, which is like, where is it coming from? Is it coming from clarity? Is it truth talking? Is it emptiness dancing, to use that wonderful adjective phrase, which actually my friend Maya, I believe, used first, Maya Rodet. Or is it coming from a place of conditioning, or a place of self-righteousness, or a place of anger, or a place of lack, or any of these things? So what a time to be alive, because we have such opportunity we're awakening not just to consciousness and to essence and to true nature, but with the internet, and there's an awakening to how we have set things up collectively, how we've arranged things, how systems are working and not working, how power really is run, and so on. So this fascinates me, that the two are happening simultaneously. There's an awakening to unity of consciousness that seems to be happening more commonly than it once did, though of course that's a speculation. And simultaneously there's this awakening to the state of the world, how we've been behaving with our environment, and how dysfunctional things have been.
It's definitely a very exciting time with the technology that's evolving, with the consciousness that's evolving, and how the two are going to interrelate further and further, I think is really exciting. And I want to go back to the point you made about Gandhi and just touch on that a little bit more. So two social movements that come to my mind that are really made up, because first of all, many social movements have not been successful in what they've been trying to do, but two that have been very successful in what they tried to do, Gandhi and the movement he was a part of, and also Martin Luther King and the movement he was a part of. And what I think on in both those scenarios, there was this intention of, this movement, are gonna be the change we want to see, right? We're gonna be the conscious we want to embody, and in doing that, we trust that our perceived opposition will rise to that level also. And I think that's the way that you make the change, right? Is like, instead of pointing the finger at someone else, you have first be really clear that You're embodying it. There's actually this great story of Gandhi, and I won't tell the story exactly correctly, 'cause I don't remember exactly, but I'll get the basic gist of it. He's speaking somewhere, and maybe you've heard the story, but a mother comes up with a child and says, my child, he's eating too much sugar. Can you tell him to stop eating sugar? And Gandhi says, come back to me in a week. And she's like, what? She doesn't understand, but comes back to him in a week and asks the same question. And he says, to the boy, stop eating sugar. He says, why'd you make me wait a week? And he says, a week ago, I was eating sugar.
This is the only form of leadership, right? Leadership by example.
Right. Yeah.
Is it also, again, for us to let our life be our teaching? And so this is where that nakedness and the rawness and the vulnerableness and the transparency, this other word that I like to use, is a teaching in and of itself.
Yeah, but I think it's really important right now. I mean, it's always important, but I'm just feeling what I'm feeling in the energy socially right now is that to just bring that home. I think the study your friend did is really valuable, and that's my conclusion is that yes, the conscious means everything. You know, if you're responding to hatred with hatred and anger with anger and fear with fear and mean words with mean words, name calling with name calling, like these things don't make the change we want to see. And when we can really like make that shift in ourselves and really be mindful of not responding in the same like manner to these things, but coming from a different level of consciousness, then that's how we really make change in the world.
Yeah, 100%. You use that expression, be the change, and there's so much subtlety in that. It's a sort of cliched, rather hackneyed phrase that's used so often. And for me, this is to be awake. It is to be present as presence and to communicate from emptiness, from feeling, from what's here right now as much as is possible. And there is something really exquisite about holding groups and allowing a different form of human interaction to emerge, allowing a different way of humans to be together. A memory just flips into my mind. It was a retreat a couple of years back in Tennessee, and a woman was expressing her pain and suffering that she'd experienced and the burden of that men have inflicted on her and her experience of life and collectively. And of course, the enormity of this is easy to contemplate. And what happened in this moment, a beautiful man in the retreat, good friend, took on the symbology of the entirety of mankind. And the dialogue just unfolded quite naturally. I was just sort of like witnessing it along with everyone else. And they ended up on the floor with him apologizing, acknowledging all the pain and hurt that had been caused by men to women back in the thousands of years, and she forgiving and holding, and there was this exquisite embrace. And from a perspective of unity of consciousness, when these little exquisite moments occur, there's a rippling, this is felt through the whole. If we look at that sort of holographic universe notion, in that moment there was a moment of forgiveness for the entirety of man's pain that has been inflicted on women. It's an exquisite thing to be able to witness and be a part of.
Yeah, and I guess that's the important point, is this part of this awakening is awakening to that there's only one consciousness, right? and I am that consciousness. We are that consciousness. And to make these shifts in ourselves, or to open to a deeper sense of who we really are, and to embrace all these parts of ourselves, all these aspects of ourselves, all these things that may be perceived as shadow and bring the light to them. We really are making the difference,
Yeah.
in the world, much deeper than we'll ever even know with our intellect.
100%. I've just bought a book that I'm eager to read, and it's called, it's by Martin Wallen, and I think it is something like you didn't create this, or something like this, but it's not quite that. What it's pointing to is I think, I haven't read it yet, the way my friend recommended it, what it's pointing to is the way that trauma, for example, gets passed down generationally. So our issues are not necessarily our issues. It may be an energetic field that has been, or a genetic offering that has been passed down, perhaps from, who knows how far back. And that brings, I get a slight tingle in the spine, that brings an exquisite beauty to our own inner work, our healing work. We sit on the mat, or we breathe into the pain, or we surrender to the contraction, or the inexplicable fear that arises from nowhere, or whatever. And of course, we experience it as my journey, my path. And yet it seems that this is well researched, what the data is pointing to is that, in fact, we're not just healing ourselves, not just allowing ourselves to be more integrated and whole, but we're doing work for humanity. Our children, if that crazy idea should ever happen with me, and the field as a whole benefits from these moments of integration, these moments of love being brought to something that was previously unlovable.
Yeah, beautiful, Will. I think what was striking me when you were talking was even the sense of my thoughts and your thoughts. This ownership of thoughts. I see a time where that's really loosening. I'm like, envisioning the space where that loosens, and there's just kind of like a collective consciousness, and there's thoughts just floating through, and they're like, when we're in a space of meditation, it's when you can feel this most deeply quite often, is a sense of like, a metaphor which I use, which I know many other people use as well, because it's a good one, is this sense of being the infinite blue sky, and clouds like thoughts, just passing by different sizes and shapes. You still there? Okay. Different sizes and shapes and colors. And when you're in that space, you don't get caught up in, is this my thought or your thought or what thought? There's just thoughts, Actually, there's a book. I never actually read the book, but I just love the title, which is Thoughts Without a Thinker. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's really a great pointer to what this awakened consciousness is.
Yeah, what is arising in the mind is nothing to do with me, or nothing to do with what I am, to perhaps be more accurate with the wording. It's it's been really fun. I'm enjoying being with you, and those words we spoke at the beginning, the rawness and the nakedness and the vulnerableness. I think I feel called to sort of offer it as an invitation to each of us, and everyone that's watching, to in our next communication with our family, or I was late to our call today, as I said, because I was playing soccer with my 5-year-old. It's the first time I've been good at soccer compared to someone else for quite some time, so I was enjoying that. So I'm going to go off and be really present and raw and vulnerable so far as it's required. So I think this is, as you were saying, it's a healing when we offer this space, when we show up as we are. And my invitation is that we all sort of move on in our days with this to be vulnerable, to realize our safety and our wholeness, our blue skyness, and share it with the world.
I love that. And I would just add, which I know we and I were all talking about before we came on the air, is to create the invitation to bring this more into our sanghas, into our spiritual communities, and into our relationships with someone who's a teacher, or someone who's a student, or someone who's on this path with us in some way, that we bring this into our spiritual communities as well.
Speaking of spiritual communities, one of the things that's keeping me very busy at the moment is Love and Truth Party. I know you're aware of this community that I've been looking to create for some time. We're getting very close to launching, and I consider you a part of that community, whether you're aware of that or not. I'm looking forward to sharing more of the website and the other bits and pieces, because what a wonderful thing to bring to the world: love and truth, and our own raw, naked, vulnerable presence.
Yeah, I'm honored to be a part of it, and definitely look forward to more co-creations together.
For sure. One thing you mentioned, a blog that people have been enjoying. I meant to ask at the time, this is on your website?
Yeah, it's called, I believe I called it The Laugh of the Mystic.
The Laugh of the Mystic. Nice title.
But you can find it on my website. Yeah, thebigglow.com.
Cool. Well, thank you, Brian. It's a joy connecting and speaking with you as always. And thank you everyone that's been watching, and lots of love to everyone.
Lots of love to everyone. Thank you all for the invitation. And it's always a joy to connect with you, and even more of a joy when we can share these amazing conversations we have with other people.
Yeah.
And
hooray for Zoom and
YouTube and Facebook, and maybe you'll be on Instagram someday.
Oh, no. I can't handle another bit of social media. I really can't. Thank you, Brian.
Yes. Infinite gratitude.
Yeah, you too.